Hello, it's Matthew Grant, partner at Instech London, and welcome to our 15th podcast. Instech London, if you haven't already come across us, is one of the largest networks around the world, bringing together insurers, startups, early stage companies, and everybody interested in innovation, data, and analytics in the insurance world. We hope you enjoy this podcast. If you'd like to learn more about us and come along to one of our monthly events, please take a look at our website, www.instech.london. We're delighted to bring you this time a recording from a webinar we ran recently, talking to three of the leading people at three leading insurance brokers, talking about how they're using data and analytics. And what we had is a very sort of practical discussion about how people in all sizes of organizations, ranging from Aon to Hyperion or to Clear, can actually make some really practical differences around innovation and the use of data analytics. So our thanks to Novidea for sponsoring this and also for being one of our supporters at Instech London. And with that, here is the webinar. Welcome everybody to our Novidea sponsored event on insurance brokers and how they are using technology, data and analytics successfully in their growing businesses. As all of you will be aware, insurance brokers, like everybody in insurance today, is looking at how you or they can best use data and analytics in their business. InsurTech has got a lot of coverage in the last few years. We're starting to hear about artificial intelligence, big data, blockchain, and we're all encouraged to be innovative. But with all this activity going on, it can be hard to know where to start. So today I'm delighted to be joined by three leading figures from insurance broking who all in their own and in somewhat different ways have been using data and analytics in their own organizations to achieve some growth. Lyn Grobler is the CIO of Hyperion, one of the fastest growing insurance brokers. Ben Rose is a lead consultant at Aon, one of the largest insurance brokers in the world, and Howard Lickens is the founder of Clear Insurance. So I'd like to just ask a question to Lyn, first of all. Lyn, you've joined the insurance world from outside of the industry. You've got an organization that has grown fast in the last few years. But I'd be interested if you could just say a few words about the company, and then also what are your impressions as an outsider coming into the insurance industry?
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me join today. Yes, so I joined Hyperion Insurance nearly 3 years ago now, although in Hyperion years, I think that's probably like 30 years ago, actually. We're a very fast-moving company, fast-growing, should I say, and fast-moving for that matter, highly successful broking company, and we sort of operate right across the chain of distribution from retail to specialty, wholesale, and underwriting. And we're in 38 countries around the world. We have made lots of acquisitions over time. Our CEO, David Howden, started the company in the early 1990s. It was just him and two other people. And we've grown now to be about 4,500 people. And we've grown through organic and inorganic growth through acquisitions. So later on, when we start talking about data, you can imagine some of the challenges that we have with these disparate groups of data around our company. How does that differ for me, having come from a very large corporation in oil and gas? I was with BP for many years. It is very different. That was a big corporate. Our challenges there were probably more political rather than the fact that the data was not rich. So the oil and gas data is rich. It's many years old. You've got lots of data to deal with. But, any company that I've worked closely with, I'm also on the board of a bank, we all struggle with the quality of data and our ability to get our arms around that data, to call it the same thing so that we can slice and dice it and get some clear answers. So I think that's a similarity certainly that I'm finding here at Hyperion.
Great, and I imagine you're bringing some very sort of clear thinking to Hyperion in terms of some of the lessons from the oil and gas industry. So Ben, just turning to you, you joined Lloyd's I think 5 years ago. You're now with Aon, very large organisation. How do you ensure that your influence actually has a meaningful impact on what Aon is doing around the world?
I think it's an interesting thing to mention, actually, my Lloyd's background, because I came, initially into the insurance market, seeing the real centre of this debate around how the industry should change, particularly around the traditional insurance transaction. But then actually moving to Aon more recently has opened up much more than just an insurance broker. You're actually looking at, a leading global professional services firm dealing with, the risk side, but also retirement, health, etc., and a huge number of shared solutions and services that go with that. Being a part of that Aon piece is obviously challenging for any individual. I'm in London, which is luckily the heart of a lot of the activity. And the main challenges that I'm facing are around, firstly, how do we help our clients? So Aon's insurance clients who are dealing with a huge range of emerging risks, challenges around how they grow, and also once they do grow, how do they cover those new angles that they're pursuing? Secondly, the other big angle I look at is how we help insurers to enable those clients and to support those clients in the best way possible. And thirdly, I try and work out how we can use technology, data and analytics to support Aon itself. Most of my work, being part of an entity within Aon called Aon InPoint, is around effectively leveraging data, analytics, consulting and engagement to support insurance carriers so that they can do a better job for our clients who are facing this changing set of risks. I'll talk a bit more about some examples as we go on, I'm sure.
Great. So yeah, no shortage of things to do, and I think it'll be interesting to dig into some examples. Howard, in some ways you are probably here representing sort of many brokers out there that are not as big as Aon or as sort of fast growing as Hyperion, but you yourself have been very successful. You sit on the Bieber Innovation group. You've made some acquisitions around technology. How do you see the world as somebody who's sort of seen the old world of broking and the sort of the future now with data and technology becoming more available?
Yes, I mean, I'd love to say I've been broking for probably 40 years. I'd love to say how the amazing revolution I've witnessed, but all I've really seen is emails introduced into what was a pretty inefficient system. So to me, technology is fundamental, but it's nowhere near there as yet. So I'm afraid I'm massively outgunned by my two colleagues here when running much bigger businesses. Mine is a much more meat and potatoes problem. I have lots of clients who need some service, and the chaotic way that particularly commercial brokers have been managing their data it's been allowed to carry on, but it shouldn't be.
So I think, Howard, just tying up something that Lyn you said about I think you put it quite politely when you said you come from your previous role and that you sort of find it quite interesting moving into the broking world. But I think there's somewhat that can be a euphemism for chaotic in Howard's words. So perhaps could you just talk a little bit about that issue around data quality that you're seeing, and I think it's an interesting aspect of that in the sense that how do you balance dealing with the data you've got in the organisation and are trying to collect versus the ability to innovate and do some new and different things, and how do you spend your time or focus between improving the internal information and accessing new information?
It's a really good point. So yes, you walk around Lloyd's of London and you do still see people with folders under their arm, and inside of those folders is sometimes the only place where certain data is stored. And another problem we have is, the fact that in broking, it's such a relationship-driven industry that, and especially in specialty broking, where our brokers they'll really have a good grip on their own portfolio, and they'll know their own data really well because it's not a lot of data. And therefore, there's not much in it for them to put it into a system unless they have to. And there's not much in it for them to be fed back from the IT department, that same data, which frankly, they already know inside out. So for us in Hyperion, part of what we're doing is saying, okay, so at the top of the house, at the exco level, at the board level, our investors, they want to slice and dice our data from the whole company. But actually, that doesn't interest everyone. So as we're starting to put our new data analytics and our new data systems in place, we are looking at ourselves and saying, okay, so what is it that we can give our business, our brokers, our clients, more importantly, that will be useful to them? And in return, therefore, we'll get their data, and we'll then be able to standardize that data and aggregate that data in the way we need to. So I think, Howard, you said it, or Ben, you said it, at the end of the day, it is about the client. So what can we do for the client? How does that then help the broker? how does that then help the business, and how does that then help our investors and our shareholders as well?
Yeah, no, I definitely want to come back to that, to the client piece. But just first of all, Lyn, I think this is a really interesting point around the incentives and how do you create the incentives internally. And I think also just sort of interpreting what you said around it has to start at the top of the company. Can you give us a practical example about what you've done to encourage people to share data, even if it isn't immediately obvious why there's a benefit of doing that?
You know what, it comes back to the basics. It comes back to sitting down with people, talking through why you're having the conversation, explaining the advantage to the company of getting the data right. And then what we've also done in some cases is we've got the team to put some ideas together around data analytics. So put some ideas together about, did you know that across your portfolio we've got this insight or that insight? And then that kind of draws people in. So that model works quite well. What also works very well for us in our company is if you get one leader interested in something and get him or her then to sell it to his or her peers, that's way better than the technology department trying to sell something. So that's another method that's worked well for us, where we've implemented something for one team, and they've then gone and spoken to another team and got that to work. What I'm really keen to build on even further is some of the younger people who've come into our organization who have really good ideas and are far less risk adverse, that far more interested in trying something else out, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So grabbing onto those guys where we can. We've even managed to persuade our business to have one of their individuals move into the technology team to work more closely with us, to come up with new ideas, to play around with innovation, and then, as I say, take that back into the businesses and see if we can get them interested. We haven't had to get to carrot and stick just yet. I'm hoping we can keep it to carrots, and that's the way we'll keep moving forwards.
No, I think that's great. I mean, that bringing together both in the senior level and then giving opportunities to people who've sort of more recently joined, it seems to make a lot of sense. When we were talking earlier, you had a similar theme with your own, I think, your organisation and also the companies you've acquired around. You've got to bring them with you in terms of bringing them into the company culture, and presumably data is part of that. Could you just sort of talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing you can't do when you are an acquirer of businesses is suddenly wave a magic wand and change people to the way you want them to get to be. So you have to work with the grain. But as a result, we inherit lots of old school ways of doing things. It'd be nice if you had one system in a business like ours, but sometimes it feels like we've got about 50 or 60. And I think there's a balance between evolution and revolution. We can as Lyn was saying, we can take parts of the business and slice them off and e-trade them, and we'll find parts of our business who are very pleased with that, and then look to widen that out. But that's only ever going to grab a small part of the business. And I think if you can use that as a puppy dog sale, maybe, to actually set up the revolution. And as you know, we're trying to experiment with a completely different way of dealing with customers as well. But I don't think we can suddenly throw at people, here's something new, you'll love it, because they won't.
But your comment earlier, which I think was slightly flippant, but also I think has got a lot of truth around it. The biggest technological revolution in insurance broking has been email in the last 40 years. That's a sad indictment of the insurance world, if that's as good as it got. So I'd like to come back on that last comment in a minute about some of the things you're doing and the balance of doing things within the organisation versus externally. But not to forget, the main reason why brokers exist is to service the client and of course to make some money. Ben, you sort of mentioned that in passing, but what are examples where you've seen you being able to help your clients sort of with some of their ideas and be more effective through your own connections and sort of data access?
So very much for us, this is where you have a client problem that you need to solve, and often in order to solve that problem, you're going to need some insurers to support that risk that they're trying to tackle. And in some cases, Aon already has the data that's required to present the fair understanding of the risk the client's facing, but also to put forward a case to the insurer. They'll be able to actually knowingly support that risk in a safe way that they're comfortable with. What Aon has tended to do here is actually to go out for large problems facing our clients or large risks and opportunities, and to actually go and get that data if it doesn't already exist. So IP is a really good example of this. So if you look at the intellectual property world at the moment, we're talking about large companies, that have intangible assets. I think I saw a statistic recently that something like 85% of the S&P 500's assets are now intangible. There's something like 20 trillion of assets floating around there. How do you, as a broker like Aon, if you want to be a partner to these companies, begin to tackle that risk? So actually we found the guys who are the best. We found a company called 601 West in the US, who are an IP specialist in patents, etc. We've now brought them under the Aon company group in order to form an intellectual property solutions team that can help build solutions specifically for this type of company. That's just one example, but in general, it's a principle I think that Paul Mang once set out called open architecture innovation. We're going to have to partner with new data sources, often startups, but also often large companies that can provide us with new ways of looking at risks that we haven't looked at them before, in order to build solutions that actually help a client handle a risk. So
picking up on that, sort of my earlier question to you about how do you make an influence, it sounds like for you, if the strategy of Aon is to solve big problems for clients or big emerging problems, which makes sense because that's a new greenfield area. If you can bring together, or you can external forces plus internal data and find clients, then you can actually create some real visibility and success. And I think back to Lyn's point about people earlier in their careers and how do you motivate them, an organisation that can actually give people the ability to do that can actually keep people in the organisation, and this whole challenge about how do you innovate internally versus externally. So how can I come to you in a minute on the innovation one, but Lyn, just in terms of just coming back to this whole issue about the data and organisation, and what do you do when it comes to sort of tools and processes that you find help make you more efficient when you've incentivized people to collect the data, you want to give them access to the reports? How do you actually make that practical for people in their day-to-day jobs?
Yes, I mean, our culture is very much not top-down. We do not tell people what to do. When we acquire companies, it's all about supporting them to remain independent. And we really value that. It's at the heart of what we do. So we would not have a situation where as a CIO, I'd be saying, you should all use a certain system, or you should all do anything a specific way. But having said that, the extent to which we can standardize our data, which is what we really want, the better. And so again, through our network of peers, talking to peers and learning from peers, one of the things that's definitely working for us is where we can get people to use the same system. So our Israel Howden office has worked with Novidea to actually build out a broking system that's fit for purpose for what they do. And then together with the technology team, we're now starting to spread that across to other parts of our company who, of course, operate in a similar way, remaining independent, but being able to build on the good work that's been done elsewhere. Now, that's great for me because the more of our teams internationally use the same system, the more we can very easily force, without anyone feeling the force, some sort of standardization, because you've got to standardize that data. You've got to at least all decide what we mean premium to mean, and we've got to at least all name our customers, clients by the same name. I mean, I know it's real basics, but it's really getting that data integrity. We've implemented a data warehouse, and we are probably about 80% of the way through feeding that data warehouse with the data that we have today. But now we've still got a massive cleanup to do before we can really, really get onto the sort of fancier data analytics that would sit on top of that.
It sounds like your role is you sort of help people, guide them towards the tools that are out there, but you don't sort of suppress them if they've got some good ideas, and you let the great ideas flourish. And I think also when we were talking before, you mentioned your legacy is not just about legacy systems, it's legacy culture and it's legacy data.
Absolutely. So it's legacy people. I mean, that might sound a bit harsh, but people who's successful, and we've got a lot of successful people in our business who've done things a certain way and see absolutely no reason to change it. And it's so how you can influence and encourage them to change. Legacy systems where there's no business case to change them, they're working, right? So, to come in and say, right, move on to a new shiny system, what's the return on that investment? So in some cases, what we're doing is sort of shrinking that system of record back office system and looking at some new shiny front end applications that are a lot easier to use, especially where they are B2B or even B2C.
So Howard, you recently got involved, or a couple of years ago, involved with a new startup. You possibly could have done that internally and set up some innovation for it, but you decided to go externally and make an investment. Can you just talk about the thinking behind that and how that's getting on?
Sure, and I think you massively overestimate my abilities to run such a scheme. Yes, I have known for years that I'm working at a much more mundane level than my two colleagues here, but we have known that the back office systems that we all have to work with are varying forms of legacy going back 20, 30, 40 years. And so, John Warburton, who I know quite well, when he came to speak to me and said he's got an idea, fortunately his idea chimed with mine, and he could bring to it an ability to run a project and an ability to run a software project, but he didn't really have a clue how an insurance broker would work. So it's an ideal partnership. We can bring broking knowledge, he can bring technology and the vision. We've been working on it for 18 months or so. It's never finished. It's never going to be finished. But I'm not aware of anything else that I could buy off the shelf, and there may be others being developed. But certainly the traditional software is just not based around the customer, and it's not based around data. There's not one version of the truth. As Lyn is saying, her brokers will be doing things the way they've done them for years. They'll have data sitting in pockets all over the place and never being reconciled. And there must be a huge amount of efficiency gains, but there must also be some extra insight that could be gained from all this data we've got locked away in a library somewhere.
So your sort of advice for anybody else out there who is looking at partnerships, or maybe as a question, is that something that you can do? If you find the right partner, you can be somewhat hands-off, you let them do the development, you check in now and again, you give them access to your data? Or is it, for most organisations, is that going to be quite an all-consuming activity if they're going to partner with somebody else? Oh,
look, it's all-consuming. I'm just fortunate to have people who actually do the donkey work, so I can say this would be a jolly good idea, and thankfully somebody else is doing it. No, there's a lot of hard graft in turning what I described earlier as chaotic systems that we have at the moment, turning those into instructions and the work of turning that into something a software developer can understand. That involves the broker, it involves the software developers and the business analysts in the middle. No, there's a hell of a lot of work to sandwich those two together, just that I don't do it.
Now, Ben, one of the things you've done, and I think this has been successful more recently in the last few years, but you've managed to create a much more integrated approach globally in terms of the information you're finding and feeding back and building that. Can you just talk a little bit about how that's working and how does Aon bring together people from different regions, different ideas into something that's coherent, and a bit of Lyn's point about why would they bother doing it if it doesn't immediately benefit them?
Absolutely. I think that is the key point. There's got to be a benefit perceived in collecting all of this data and arranging it very nicely. I think we were lucky that leadership had foresight quite a long time ago that there would be a big advantage to collecting all of our data in consistent ways around the world, and bringing it together has enabled us to really support all three of the areas that I mentioned at the beginning of this call. So when you've got a really good data set across insurance, across reinsurance, you can go to clients and you can help them understand what risks clients like those clients are facing. And then you can help them understand what coverages they should be buying and what they should be expecting. You can also use that data to help benchmark insurers and help them understand, which insurers have the best claim service, which insurers are the best rated. If all this data is at the touch of your fingers, then as a broker, you're transformed. But similarly, it means that your role as a broker towards insurers becomes much more valuable. So in Aon Endpoint, my team, we spend a lot of time basically delivering very valuable insights from data. We take all of the trading data and then collate it with other external sources of data. We acquired a company called Finacord recently that have amazing market data and views on that. And if you present that view of the world and the ability to cut and segment the global insurance market into many, many pieces, then the ability to match client need with insurer appetite is extremely, enhanced by that process. And again, it's something we do very successfully on the reinsurance side. I think for us now, having got our ducks in a row, so to speak, with the data, the next step is how do we start doing more and more beyond the descriptive. So we think of data analytics at the moment quite often in terms of can we show what's going on, which really for the insurance industry is a big step, but actually outside of the insurance industry was something we should have been doing for a long time. And what we are working on now, particularly in our centres for innovation and analytics, and an endpoint also, is looking at how we can move from descriptive up to predictive, prescriptive, other forms of analytics, such as trying to identify when risk events are going to happen before they do. How do you interact with predictive maintenance for clients and that type of data? How do you work out whether accounts are more likely to churn than others in different regions? There's so many types of analysis that you can do that would not be possible without getting the data organised first. So good incentives, I would say, for anyone else thinking of investing in data.
Great, and the fact you can do that as a very large organisation means that as a concept, you've still got to actually figure out how to do it practically. But the sort of idea of getting consistent data and encouraging people to share it, an organisation of any size can do that, and that's sort of innovation with a small I as opposed to a big sort of capital I. So just as we get towards the end of the discussions, Lyn, without giving away any state secrets, I'd be interested in sort of two related questions from you. So one is, what do you see as the sort of one of the most interesting areas of development in the area of risk for your clients, so solving the risk problem? And then secondly, what advice would you have for other people out there who are trying to sort of figure out how do they get the most impact out of technology and innovation?
Yeah, I'll try and answer both those questions in a couple of sentences joined up, because I think it falls in one answer for us. Innovation, you need technologists, you need people in the business. How do you work together? And so many organizations have tried it so many different ways. You spin off a different team, you create an innovation team, you try and do it on the side of your desk. And we try to approach it a slightly different way, which is taking the learnings of what some of us have experienced elsewhere. And we've recently launched what we call our fourth leg of our business, which is called Hyperion X. And we've taken one of our best CEOs, Barnaby Rugg-Price, to lead it. Barnaby's a really strong leader. He's highly respected across the business. He understands insurance inside and out. He's up for innovation. He's got some brilliant ideas. And that, together with a really strong technology team, to help develop ideas really quickly, to work in a highly agile way. We're busy sort of working our way through setting up DevOps. We're training or coaching business owners to become product owners. It's nothing new, it's nothing new to the industry. But for me, it's that combination of real experts in insurance who are willing to try something new, working very closely with a strong technology team. That's the secret sauce for me.
So sort of bringing best practices from elsewhere and bringing them into the insurance space. How would you advice to others, and one area of risk you think we're going to hear more about, or more opportunities looking forward?
I think the main thing I would say is that innovation can be quite intimidating. If you look at the really brand new fintech and all the new terms that none of us really understand if we're insurance brokers, but actually small, modest innovations which will make you more efficient, which will have a huge difference to your customers and a huge difference to your bottom line. They can be very simple, they can be very small. Just a little bit of e-trading of a scheme can make you massively more efficient and give the clients what they want. So I think it's a danger to think fintech is all about brand new startups, one of whom I'm a partner with. But I think it's equally, if not more important, for day-to-day businesses, just to think, what can I improve? What can I improve by 1%, 5%? And that, I think, is really vital. And yeah, as for my big bet is that we can actually come up with a system which does use artificial intelligence, does use to enable me to give better value-added advice, not to. I think e-trading and what have you is very much considered a way of getting things cheaper, getting things quicker. I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in getting better advice, giving people a better way of being able to do what they want, and for my people to be adding the value.
And Ben, same questions for you.
For me, it all stems back to the client problem again. So understanding your client's needs, and they're the ones leading the change here. It's really a race to keep up with their changing demands as they face things like, reputation and brand risk, cyber risk, failure to innovate. I think was another thing that came up in our global risk management survey. We've really got to be there as their partner, helping them have the solutions they need. And as part of that, you've got to have a certain baseline of technical capability, whether that's e-trading or whether that's new sources of data. And that really is a full service broker today, is it's somebody who can bring all of those things together in one and then bring the partners along with them in terms of actually providing the insurance capacity.
Great. Well, I'm glad we ended up with the client, because ultimately that's, as I said, that's what we're all here. I think it's been very helpful to get all of your views, and thank you very much, Lyn, Howard and Ben, for being so open and sharing some of your ideas, and making it in many ways, if not simple, at least sort of practical, with some very, I think, good takeaways for people. So we're going to wrap it up here. As I mentioned, we will be sending this out as a podcast. I'm sure if you want to reach out directly to any of the panelists, you can track them down through LinkedIn. So with that, I'll say thank you very much, and good evening or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as we enjoyed the discussion. If you would like to hear more about Novidea, and in particular see a video when Lyn Grobler talks about their use of Novidea, you can find that on the Novidea website.